So this is Lavos, our newest Warframe, our Alchemist, our Snackboy, easily right now the most unique Warframe we have in game. A very tanky Warframe as well, which is perfect for me. A Warframe that's basically a walking nuke core at the same time, that can spread multiple status elements across a room, and in doing so amplify the damage of his ultimate ability for each ailment that is affecting an enemy, but also boost the damage of condition overload based melee weapons for yourself and for your squad by a hell of a lot. Now he's also unique in the sense that all of his abilities are cooldown based. He doesn't use energy, doesn't use shield instead of energy, just those cooldowns, and one of his abilities will drastically reduce the cooldowns on your other abilities simply by sending out a probe that will electrocute as many poor souls as possible. 1 second reduction on your cooldowns for every enemy that you electrocute with that probe. Now before I quickly go over his abilities, it's worth stating, right, I really enjoy Lavos a lot, possibly up there with one of my favourite frames right now, but I also have elements of this Warframe that I do not enjoy, which I will go over in a second as well. Now his passive is picking up orbs makes Lavos status immune for 10 seconds, but he can also infuse elements when he holds down the cast of each one of his 4 abilities. Holding down your first ability will imbue Toxin into your next cast, holding down your second will imbue Cold, hold down the third ability will imbue Electric, and hold down the fourth ability will imbue Heat. But you can also combine 2 of these 4 elements, so you can imbue Cold and Toxin for your next ability cast to deal viral damage. You could imbue Electric and Toxin so that your next ability cast deals corrosive. You get the idea. Doing this with his Vile Rush, which is his second ability, I found to be very, very effective. Dashing through groups of enemies while throwing out corrosive damage to reduce armor felt really bloody good. Really good. Now his first ability is his Ophidian Bite. This is basically Snake Whip. You're just going to whip an enemy with snakes. It deals toxin damage, but more importantly, this is a big chunky heal for your Lavos. However, it has got an 8-second cooldown. Your second ability is that Vile Dash, where you will skate across the ground, leaving a path of cold damage behind you, which vials of, I guess, cold will explode out of, and this has a 5-second cooldown. Now I think my build has 42 charges of those vials that smash out of it as you're skating across the ground. Infusing this, like I said, with corrosive or viral was how I found it the most useful, but the cold procs also helped with slowing enemies down if you didn't infuse another element into it. Now his third ability is your cooldown reduction one. This is your transmutation probe, where you will send out a device that electrocutes or shocks enemies as it passes through them. More oftenly than not though, I found that it actually gets stuck on either walls, objects, or it will hit an enemy and it will stop dead still. So I found it jumping above enemies and casting it just above their heads, or trying to cast it through a group of them where you see a gap, was much more effective instead of just hitting the button and hoping it would pass through enemies, because it just doesn't seem to. It also converts energy and health orbs into universal orbs, which seem to work with health conversion, but it also turns all of your ammo drops into universal ammo drops as well. So it is a built-in ammo mutator. Now like I said, this reduces your cooldowns by 1 second for every enemy that you electrocute. But if you were to equip a Streamline mod, then that 1 second becomes a 1.3 second for every enemy that you hit. So that's all efficiency does on this Warframe. Streamline won't affect anything whatsoever, just these probes. But a decent bit of range on your Warframe will allow it to shock more enemies, which I would highly recommend. I think my Lavos is sitting at 175 range. Now his ultimate basically works the same way as Condition Overload. You send out a lot of probes in a large radius around your Lavos, which deal heat damage, but this damage is multiplied by 100% for every element that's already affected those enemies. So if you were to bring a Kuva Nucor with you and combine it with his ultimate, you could just sit back and watch the world burn, because it's going to kill everything nearly one shot. It also has a 30-second cooldown. That's a long time to wait for your ultimate, so you need to shock 30 enemies with your probe, with your third ability, in order to have your ultimate straight off cooldown the minute that you cast it. So there is a checks and balance kind of system to it. You can't just spam his ultimate. He's not a press 4 to win Warframe. Now he's not overpowered and not bad. He's a frame that's going to be either love or hate, since he has no energy consumption and he works off cooldowns, so it's going to take a bit of time to get used to this type of Warframe, so you might not enjoy using him because of that. I really enjoyed using him, and having to bounce his abilities off one another is what made him more fun for me. that kind of synergy. However, my biggest gripe with Lavos is those cooldowns, which I know it's a new concept, first frame to do this, and it's going to feel awkward at first, but it did have an element of clunkiness to it. None of these cooldowns can be reduced by your build or can be reduced by your mods. Efficiency only affects those transmutation probes and how much gets knocked off your existing cooldowns when you shock an enemy. Enemies that there is a really good chance are already dead by your teammates, whether there's a room nuking Siren or other teammates running around melting everything, which means you can't reduce your cooldowns because there's no enemies to shock. And because of this, at times you can be left fumbling around waiting to use an ability that you can't use because you're still on cooldown, or because the single ability that you have that reduces those cooldowns also has the longest cooldown out of all of them. So your transmutation probe has like a 10-second cooldown, which you can't reduce in any way. Now, because of this, I found myself using a set rotation of his abilities, almost like you used to with World of Warcraft. Also, the infusing of elements felt clunky at first until I did get used to them, but when it came to a rotation, I found myself using Vile Rush to dash through enemies and spread Corrosive or Viral, or even Magnetic when I stupidly fat-fingered the wrong infusion, because that takes some getting used to as well. Then I would cast his ultimate after Vile Rush, followed by the Transmutation Probe to reduce the cooldown of those abilities and have them back off cooldown as quickly as possible. I would only really use his Ophidian Bite if I needed a chunk of a heal, because the damage of it is kind of pants. Now my dash would be back off cooldown the minute I would cast Transmutation Probe, because it only has a 5-second cooldown, but if you mess up your rotation and cast the probes before the others, then it's a long wait for your ultimate, which has a 30-second cooldown. I feel like his Vile Rush is probably going to be his most useful ability, simply because it has a lot of mobility attached to it, but also it has the shortest cooldown, so it's the ability you're going to be able to use more than anything else. I'm finding myself saying mobility and ability way too much. Really confusing. Now, as you can see from my video, I ran my Lavos through the Steel Path. This gave me a very high density of enemies, which made him much more fun to work with and made it much easier to reduce my cooldowns. I was also playing it solo, not in a squad, which allowed me to get my cooldowns off pretty quickly because of the Transmutation Probe. Like I said, if you're in a squad, chances are they're already killing all the enemies, which will make it harder for you to get your cooldown reduced. On normal missions, you won't have this kind of enemy population or enemy density, unless maybe you're in Sanctuary Onslaught or a few hours into an endless mission, so he might not seem as useful if you're just running normal missions because of those cooldown issues. Now, for modding my Lavos, I've gone for power strength and range. Duration doesn't really affect anything except the status duration on enemies, and having just a base 100% duration felt long enough for me to kill everything. Now, efficiency, like I said, only affects the orbs on your third ability, but a streamline or a fleeting might help you reduce those cooldowns faster if you're not having the same kind of enemy density. Now, as you can see, I've also put 2 Umbral Form on my Lavos. That's honestly how much I like his kit and the alchemy theme and how much I'm enjoying using him. I've had those Forma sitting around for a very long time and I've decided to use them on Lavos. Like I said, he is a tanky Warframe. He's one that can spread a lot of elements and I've been really enjoying the synergy between his abilities. Now, I do feel like his third ability needs some tweaking. Its cooldown shouldn't be the longest one. Allow efficiency maybe to affect overall cooldowns, or have that ability, his third ability, at 5 seconds like Vile Dash. That way you could alternate between both of those abilities and not be sitting waiting for cooldowns to refresh before enemies have all been killed by your squad or you can't reduce that cooldown. So I guess the too long didn't watch version of this would be that he is a really fun Warframe to use. There is great synergy between his abilities, but there is also clunkiness right there that I don't really enjoy in terms of waiting for those abilities to come off cooldown. And if you're in a squad of 4 players that's killing everything, then chances are it's going to be really hard for you to make the most out of those transmutation probes. But let me know in the comment section below what you think of Lavos, whether you've been enjoying him or not, if you have him yet, if you've built him from the event. Chances are some of you have, some of you haven't, maybe some of you picked him up for platinum, but let me know in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching.